Good morning, everyone. It's April 27th, and we are so happy to welcome virtually Rabbi Marcia Plumb to Macomb Solel Lakeside. And I'm going to do a few announcements, and then the man who needs no introduction, Rabbi Serrata, will introduce Rabbi Plumb, and we'll continue from there. Please remember, WZC is still open for voting, vote reform. We have to get as many votes as possible. This is one way to make a change in Israel, to really have a say there for progressive Judaism. I can't emphasize how important it is, and I know Rabbi backs me up on that as well. Next Sunday, we have Ryan Laverne, a Red Sox player, Rabbi Plum, a former Red Sox player, but he's a Jewish MLB, and he'll be talking about his experience in the Maccabi games, and he's got a book out for kids. You're not going to want to miss that. So, Rabbi, have I forgotten anything?
Nothing that we can't come up with some other time, I think.
Okay.
So,
All right, great.
yeah.
So I introduce you to introduce our speaker.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. It is indeed my pleasure to introduce Rabbi Marcia Plumb. He's my dear friend and esteemed colleague, an extraordinary teacher. After growing up in Houston, Texas, Marcia has served the Jewish community for decades now in exotic locations like Connecticut and London, and now in Boston. And some of you may remember Rabbi Plumb from the depths of COVID, when our community had the opportunity to share in programs that she created to bring beautiful music into our lives for Kabbalat Shabbat on several occasions with renowned musicians. So she's always been a creative force in the Jewish community. And she's here today primarily as she has become a premier teacher of the Mussar tradition, which she'll tell you more about. But the Mussar tradition was nearly decimated by the destruction of European Jewry. So bringing it back to life and bringing it into the modern day is an extraordinary part of Marcia's rabbinate. And to that end, I want to share a couple of things that she's doing right now. One is we are, of course, in the 49-day period of counting the Omer, and Marcia has been sending out a remarkably beautiful daily inspiration from the Mussar tradition for the Omer. And if I can share for just 1 second, I'll show you. I don't know if this is today's or not, but today or yesterday, today. So you can see with a little piece of art and things like that. And you can find this and much more about classes that Marcia does on her website, which is a soulinbalance.com, right? So a soul in balance, like one word, and it's a beautiful website actually as well. And there are classes and other opportunities there for you to take a look at. It is my great pleasure and honor to introduce my friend, Rabbi Marcia Plumb, to all of you.
It's such a pleasure to be with y'all again. And it's wonderful to see Judith as well. And actually, you left out one little thing, and then I haven't come to Macomb Solel, but Macomb Lakeside, but I did come to Solel, I think.
To Lakeside.
To Lakeside.
Lakeside, yeah.
At some point, years ago.
I have to admit, I'm not sure anybody on this call was there.
Oh, right. Okay, then.
Yeah, it was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago, but it is wonderful to be with y'all. You can hear the Texan come out, and sometimes the London shines through just a little bit. But it's a pleasure to be with y'all. I have my first question is, Vanessa, can I put people, I know you've highlighted me, but I'd love to put people on gallery view for just a minute.
Everyone is free. Anyone can do gallery view, but
I don't know if I can do gallery view is what
I think so. Just go to view, top right, and put in gallery.
It's okay. I just want to be able to see. I'm going to ask everybody a question. So
Okay.
I just want to be able to see people's responses in some way. So my question is, how many of you, I'm going to remove the spotlight for a second.
Okay.
Great. How many of you have, if you just raise your hand, I'm not going to ask any more details than that. How many of you have either heard of Mussar or studied Mussar? Okay, and other people don't have their screens on, so I'm going to assume that maybe Bob and Judith, maybe you can give me an idea of other people who are on the call who may or may not have heard about it. So if everybody knows about it, then I'll kind of skip over.
Everybody doesn't know about it. I know
Okay.
everybody on the I know everybody on the call, and they don't.
Okay, great. But some people do, so that's
Susan
great.
has Susan, yeah.
Great, great.
Oh.
Okay, so then now I have a second question for anyone who feels able to. So is there anything, I'm not going to ask details about it, but my question is, do any of you, can you think of something that you would like to change about yourselves? It may be a particular behavior. It may be something that you do and you think, oh, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to do that again. And then we do it again. Or some sort of internal reaction that we have that consistently we always have, and that we often have, and we really want to get rid of that reaction, whatever it may be. So I'm going to ask if anybody has anything like that they would like to shift about themselves. I know I'm raising my hand loud and clear because I certainly do. So that is the role of, ultimately, the role of Mussar is to help us use Jewish wisdom, use ancient Jewish wisdom. And now you can highlight me again, or maybe you have spotlighted me, I don't know. Is to use Jewish wisdom, ancient Jewish wisdom, to help us move from who we are today into who we most want to be tomorrow, little by little by little. It began, just to give you, before I give you a little history of Mussar, it is an ancient pedagogic method for character development, for living up to our best potential, to have a greater sense of holiness within ourselves. And I'll talk about that in a minute. To be the person we most can be and most want to be in this world. And that's what the Mussar path is designed to help us become. So very brief, what is Mussar? So my first Mussar class, I don't remember if you were in this class with me, actually, was with David Ellenson in my second year of Hebrew Union College, Zichrono Livracha, when he taught Mussar from the point of view of a sociological and historical phenomenon and a literary phenomenon. So it began in roughly the 9th century with a theologian philosopher named Bahia ibn Pakuda. And Bahia believed, he was Spanish, and he was obviously early medieval Jew, and he believed that he believed in traditional Judaism. Obviously, he was a practicing early medieval Jew, but he also believed that if all we do and I'm summarizing this in one sentence, if all we do is, in order to be holy, because he loved the verse, Kadoshim Tihiyu, which means you shall be holy, in the book of Exodus and the book of Deuteronomy and Leviticus, it's kind of all over the Tanakh, the Hebrew Bible. And he said, what does it mean to be holy? What does it mean everyone should be holy? You shall be holy. And he said that what most people understand as being holy in his time, and I think in ours often, is that you tick off the boxes of the 613 mitzvot, the commandments, that if you make your sukkah the right way, and if you keep kosher in the right way, and you keep Shabbat in the right way, then that makes you holy. He called those things duties of the limbs, things we do with our bodies. And he said that we also need 613 commandments for our inner life, for our heart, for our soul, for our attitude. He said it's not enough just to do external things Jewishly well. We also need to have a sense of holiness about how we see other people and how we judge other people and how we judge ourselves and our internal responses to others. That's as important. Our inner life is as important as our external life, according to Bachya. And he wrote a book called Duties of the Heart, where he outlined what he called gates, particular characteristics that we all have, that if we fine tune those characteristics, we will become holy. From that led to over 1,000 years, from the roughly 9th century up until the early 20th, mid 20th century, of many, many Mussar teachers who adopted that understanding that one's inner attitudes and inner responses inform our behavior. And if we shift our inner responses to things, then it will also shift our external responses, our external behavior. I'm going to pause there for a second. And I'm going to invite what I know that Vanessa suggested to hold questions. I'm going to invite you, if you have questions about any of this, to please put them in the chat, because I will come back to them. And I do really want your questions and I want your thoughts. And so I really believe in being interactive. So in a couple of minutes, I'm going to pause and see what questions you have that come up in the chat, or that you might have that you want to raise your hand. And then I'll carry on to the next piece about Mussar. So just to go back to Ike's point about the history of Mussar, Mussar stayed within a very elite group of scholars and thinkers until the 18th century, when the emancipation happened and Jews left the ghetto in Europe, and they started going to university and living where they wanted and interacting much more with Christians and secular people, etc. And people started leaving the practice of Judaism. That's at the same time as the Reform movement began, the conservative movement began, and people all over the Jewish world were wondering, how do we keep Jews Jewish now that they're not living in an isolated ghetto together? And one man, Israel Salanter, said that the way to keep Jews Jewish is by using Mussar, is helping people focus on the holiness of their souls, their inner life. Because if they can't do the physical things, because they have to now work on Shabbat, for example, so they can't keep Shabbat in the same way as they would have when they were living in the ghetto, only with Jews, then how do we, then we'll focus on their inner life, and that will connect them to Judaism through Mussar. So he set up yeshivot, study centers all over. He was from Lithuania, and he set those up in Eastern Europe. And then he taught teachers, and students then became teachers, and they taught students who became teachers. And it was a whole movement until, as Ike said, until the war, when the Holocaust wiped them all out. And Mussar went back into this ultra traditional elitist world again, until probably think as a movement again, two people helped bring it out of that ultra-Orthodox world into the English-speaking pluralist world. And I would credit that largely to Rabbi Ira Stone in Philadelphia and Alan Marinis in Canada, both of whom helped bring and have created, in a way, a new Mussar movement, as it were. And now the Mussar books are much more accessible in English, and both Alan and Ira have written excellent books on the subject. So I'm going to pause there for just a second and see what any questions that you might have about Mussar in general before I tell you something about why I'm passionate about it and a little bit about how to use it for ourselves. So I'm going to take a sip of water while you. So Evie, it looks like, why are some of the Mussar traits, ethics, particularly Jewish? I feel they are universally spiritual. And I would agree with you on that. The root of Mussar itself comes in the 9th century. So there are lots of links, lots of overlaps for Mussar and psychology, Mussar and positive psychology, Mussar and therapy, in all sorts of ways. And it is also a methodology. One of the differences between like positive psychology, for example, or psychology and Mussar, and I'm going to put this quite bluntly, is that Mussar is not particularly concerned with how we got to where we are. Meaning, like with psychology in many ways, part of psychology and positive psychology, etc., is to understand the wounds that got us to where we are now, that cause our behavior. And so if we understand the original wounds and help heal those, then who we are will improve in the future. Mussar is not really concerned with our past. It's concerned with who we are right now, where we are right now, and how we want to move into the future. Kind of a way of thinking of Mussar as like the Torah of now. How do we use this ancient pedagogic tool to help shape and use Judaism for who we are as human beings right now? At the same time, Mussar is rooted in Jewish tradition and Jewish thinking, and I'll show you a couple of texts about what I mean by that. And I've certainly used it in all sorts of settings. One of the things I did when I was in London was I worked for the National Health Service, and I trained doctors and nurses on the importance of spiritual well-being related to physical health. And I used Mussar in the teaching of that. And most of them weren't Jewish, but it is possible, obviously, to use the understandings of how we become more holy and more spiritually aware and more hopeful using Mussar in language that doesn't have to be rooted just in Judaism. Amy, are you saying that our thoughts are a dictator and we need to stay in awareness and notice our thoughts so we can do a positive reframe when negativity comes up, that we can then become more balanced, more in balance with the life we desire? That is a beautiful understanding of Mussar. One of my favorite images of using Mussar is in a circus. Do you remember the Barnum and Bailey circuses? And do you remember the lion tamer, the ring where the lions would go in a circle? And I don't want to debate at the moment the pros and cons or whatever of how the animals were treated at the moment. We're going to put that aside. But the image of the lion tamer is one of my favorite images, in that our feelings and our thoughts can become like wild lions, like out of control. That either we perseverate or or lots of different thoughts come in, or lots of feelings, or one feeling comes in and can be overwhelming. And both the thoughts and the feelings, whether we're aware of them or not, can knock us off balance. And sometimes we're aware of it and sometimes we're not. Sometimes we're just in a bad mood and we don't know why, or we snap at others and we don't really know why, but it's because there's stuff going on inside us. And what Mussar is, and what the traits are, and the pedagogic tool is like the lion tamer that says, okay, you all want to go wild. It's time to come back and bring order and awareness into what is going on, so that we can find calm, so that we can find where we want to be right now and what is going on, and so that we can take the next step forward in a way that is healthy and whole and holy. So it may be that our thoughts can help us, and our thoughts do have a big role in helping calm our feelings, but sometimes it's the feelings that help calm down the thoughts. But either way, having a Mussar structure to help be the lion tamer for all of it can help us know what the next step needs to be. Judith, William or Bill or William on here. And now for my basic question, what is holy and how does it have different meaning to different people? So that is an entire course for itself. So I'm going to see if I can do a very brief understanding of holiness for our purposes right now. And that would be, for us in this hour, holiness would be being as centered and grounded in compassion, generosity of spirit, and wholeness within ourselves. There's a lot more to holiness than that, but for our purposes, that's what we're working toward. Okay, Judith, in my understanding, the traits of ethics are universal, but the understanding of each trait within the Mussar tradition is sources from Jewish texts and is often slightly different than how we understand the English words assigned to the traits. Lessons can be helpful and meaningful to all. Absolutely right. I love that. And Judith is a Mussar master. So anytime you want to jump in, just jump in, Judith. Ben Franklin was a lover of Mussar, in fact. And Ben Franklin contributed to understandings of Mussar because he had his own list of traits that he used. So there you go. And that's a whole nother subject that we're not going to do right now. But it does fit in, I suppose, with the 250th anniversary of America, I suppose. Do current Orthodox scholars, rabbis embrace Mussar or emphasize the 613 mitzvot? So I would say that a majority of very traditional Orthodox, very traditional scholars and rabbis more likely emphasize 613 mitzvot. Some also include Mussar in their teaching. So I have three nieces and nephews who are in yeshivot in Israel, and different yeshivot, and they've researched a bunch of yeshivot in Israel, and none of them do any Mussar at all. but there are a few Mussar yeshivot in Israel. I don't know very many in Europe, but yeah. So there we are. Okay, but we're making inroads, right, Judith? We're bringing it to the pluralist world, which is great. Okay, so keep asking questions. So I want to share with you very briefly an example of how Mussar affected me and why I find it so powerful. So as I said, my first awareness of Mussar was, I didn't grow up with it. I'd never heard of it. I was an active Reform Jew, and I was never taught it anywhere in my Jewish education until my second year in rabbinic school, where David Ellenson taught this course. At the same time, I was studying with a wonderful rabbi, Richard Levy, Zichrono Livracha, who gave me my first Mussar assignment. I didn't know that's what it was. He didn't call it Mussar, but he knew it was. But I was in a small spirituality group, and he gave me this assignment. And it was that, I'll give you a little context. I was someone who was very pessimistic. I was a glass half empty kind of person. I really believed that pretty much everything would go wrong in a day, and I needed to prepare for what would go wrong. So I lived in LA at the time, and I would step out of my apartment every day and think, okay, is my car still there, or has it been stolen? If it's been stolen, how would I get to school? And would I call a taxi, and how long would the taxi take? And I better get up really early because I might miss that. And I would plan my day around the things that would go wrong. And Richard knew this about me, and he gave me this assignment. And the assignment was that there's a Jewish tradition, according to the Talmud, the book of Jewish, the kind of source for a lot of our Jewish laws, which says that you're supposed to say 100 blessings every day. And the Talmud gives us those blessings, gives us what those blessings are. And one of them is hamotzi, blessing before you eat, and blessing after you eat, and blessings for all sorts of things during a day. Richard's assignment to me was that I was supposed to say 100 blessings every day, but I had to make each one different, and I had to do it for a month. So therefore, by the end of the month, I needed to have written, and he wanted me to write them down, that I needed to have written 3,000 blessings, right? I know. But I loved Richard. He was a wonderful friend and teacher. So I was like, I'm going to do this. So I bought a really nice journal and a really nice pen. And I was like, yes. So I stepped out of my apartment in LA with my journal in hand, but with my thoughts on what's going to go wrong today, right? And I stepped out of my apartment onto the first step out of the apartment, and I wrote, thank you, God. I didn't have to write them in Hebrew or anything like that. I just, very simple. So I wrote, thank you, God, for the blue sky. Thank you, God, for my health. Thank you, God, for my family. And then I couldn't think of any more. I was stuck. And I thought, this is going to be a problem because I have 97 more to go, and I can only think of 3. And I remember this really clearly. I was looking down at my journal, and out of the corner of my eye, I caught the plant that had always been on the stoop of my apartment. And it had these bright pink leaves. So I wrote down, thank you, God, for pink leaves. And then I wrote down, thank you, God, for green leaves. Thank you, God, for dark green leaves. And from then on, I would write things like, thank you, God, when I got to school. Thank you, God, for getting me to school. Okay. Thank you, God, for air conditioning. Thank you, God, for comfortable chairs. And I was kind of on a roll, and I began to get it. And by the end of the month, and I did it every day consistently for the month. And by the end of the month, I was different. I realized that there had been all these blessings around me all the time that I had never noticed because I've been so focused on the negative. All these miracles all the time that I had completely walked by and never noticed. And when I went back to Richard and said, oh my gosh, what was that? He said, that is Mussar, and we're going to learn it. And he directed me to a master Mussar and spirituality teacher, Jonathan Omerman in LA. And I began to study with Jonathan. I began to study Mussar texts with Jonathan in his living room and never looked back. And then some years later, I met Alan Marinis and saw that he was teaching this work as well. And I became before I met Alan, I became a student and teacher of Mussar ever since. So now let me just share with you just a little bit about how Mussar works, and just to tie in. And actually, I want to screen share with you a list, or actually, I'll do that in a minute. So how does Mussar, what is this pedagogic technique? How does it work? What is it? So very, very briefly, you choose something about yourself, or your teacher chooses it for you, like Richard chose for me. He realized that I needed to see the good instead of only seeing the bad. So he chose the trait that I needed to work on, which is called Hakarat Hatov, looking for the good. And so that's what we studied first with Richard. So the way it works is Richard chose this trait for me. He saw that's what I needed to shift. One of the many things I needed to change about myself, but he wanted to help me change that. So we chose the trait of Hakarat Hatov, of looking for the good. Traditionally, what you do, and what I now do as part of when I teach Mussar, is study texts on the trait. So as Judith rightly pointed out, studying Jewish texts, mostly Jewish text. I now bring in other sources as well, but traditionally you study Jewish Mussar texts on the trait to understand it better, to really dig into what is meant by Hakarat Hatov, by looking for the good, and the many layers of that trait over the centuries, and the different commentators on what that trait means. You study it in a group called a Vad, and you study it in pairs called Chavruta, where you can dig in with one other person even more deeply into the text. And that person also becomes what I think of as your Mussar buddy, who helps keep you on track with remembering what the trait is that you're working on that week, and helps you practice it. And that's the next step. So the first step is choosing the trait that you want to work on within yourself, studying the texts about it to understand the trait, studying it in these various ways. The third is what is called Kabbalot, but not Jewish mysticism. Kabbalah means to receive. So how do we take the ideas that we study and make them part of our active life? How do we make them part of our daily life? Like Richard's assignment to me was a Kabbalah. The way I took the idea of looking for the good was by writing down those blessings every day, doing some action that helped me apply the knowledge to my daily life. And that's the kind of fourth step, is actively using our bodies to do something that integrates the text in. Oops. Excuse me a second. Sorry, our smoke alarm is going off in our house, but I think I'm the only person here. So if it goes off again, I will have to pause and go check and make sure there's nothing going on.
We can't hear it at all.
I'm glad you can't. It's very loud here. So it just went off, but if it goes on again, I will have to pause and just make sure there's nothing that I need to check on in the house. Okay. Let me just get back on track for a second. One of the things that Judith does so beautifully to integrate the ideas into practice is using art. So by through music, through singing, through chant, through drawing, through action, all sorts of different methods of integrating the knowledge into our daily life. Another piece of it is, if it's part of your worldview, to pray about it. That may not be part of your worldview, but it certainly has been for mine. And so praying about that trait is become very important to me, and using liturgy, other Jewish sources to help me understand the trait has become very important to me as well. And using the counting of the Omer to help me do that as well has become central to my Mussar practice. And then finally, the last step is transformation. When you find that actually whatever it was that bothered you before doesn't quite bother you in the same way, or you've become a little bit more patient than you were before, or you're aware of when you're about to lose it in anger and you stop yourself, or just being aware that you're about to lose it is good. Some shift is what the goal of Mussar is, to shift our behavior and our attitudes and our thinking to be more aligned with who we know we could be in the world and who we most want to be. I'm going to pause there for a second. That's a kind of lots of information kind of thrown at you about how Mussar works. Actually, before I stop there and give questions, I want to share with you an example of some traits. Screen share, find that. So this is a general a list that a colleague of mine put together. There are now about 125 maybe traits that exist. For Bachya, there were, I think there were 12. Started with 12 gates, if I remember rightly. Haven't read the book in quite a while, but still. And over the centuries, they've been added to, and now there's about, as I say, about 125. I've been working on a new trait, the trait of grief. There is a trait for sadness, but there's no trait for grief. And I think grief is a powerful trait that can be used to change us for the good, depending on how we use it. So, but here's an example. And I'm not gonna read them all. I'm just gonna move it slowly so you can see some examples of traits and there might be a trait that you see that you might think, oh yeah, I could use a bit more compassion or a bit more courage. Sometimes I'm a bit too cruel. Oh, Sorry, did you hear that? No, you still can't. I'm just a second.
If you need to go check it.
It's okay. My husband just came home, so
Oh,
let him check it.
yay.
Um, so every trait has a continuum. So there's two extremes. So sometimes, for example, with patience, sometimes we may find that we need more patience because we're a bit too impatient. And sometimes we're too patient with things or people, and we end up being like a doormat. And so we need less patience. So it all varies. Each of us has our own, as Alan Marinis calls it, soul curriculum. Sometimes we might be very forgiving and too forgiving, and sometimes we need to be more forgiving, depending on the situation and depending on the person. Each of these traits, even hatred, there's no right or wrong. And there's no bad trait and good trait. They just all exist. They all existed within us. We have joy within us, and we have laziness within us. We have looking for the good within us, and we have looking for the bad within us. We have love within us, and we have envy within us. We have all of these traits. They're not, and none of them are considered bad or good. I'm going to stop. There's a whole bunch more, but you get the idea. None of them are bad or good. It's how we use them in our lives, within ourselves and with others, that is what makes the difference. Okay, I'm going to pause there for just a minute. I know we only have a few more, maybe 20 more minutes, but I'm going to give us any questions about any of that so far. That was a lot of stuff. Any thoughts, questions at the moment? I'm going to look in the chat and see if there's any, please.
I do want to add that I go up to Azrui, the Reform Camp, every summer, and we have tried to put Midot into our limud, our learning part, because we find that the kids really respond to, and we, Ometz Lev, courage, and Yedidu, friendship, and we find that this is a great positive way to teach our kids and to teach adults as well. But that's really it's been very helpful to me, and I think to our kids. And any good thing at camp has to be like a Disney movie. It has to be for the kids and for the counselors. So the counselors need Midot just the same.
So it's interesting that you say that, because I was the rabbi of a day school for 10 years in London, and we built Mussar into the curriculum. So it was an active part of both classroom management as well as helping the kids grow in understanding of themselves and in how they interacted, and in Jewish wisdom as well. In the past year and a half, I've created a Mussar framework for having hard conversations. So I've been working with, meeting with a few anti-Zionists over the last year and a half, since October 7th. I don't know if they would call themselves anti-Semites, but they definitely were. And
Kol hakavod, that's all I have to say to you. That is.
Well, our ability to have civil discourse, as we all know, has disintegrated in this country. And even though we radically disagreed and still disagree in many ways, I wanted us to be able to have civil discourse. I wanted us to be able to see the humanity in each other, to be able to listen to each other, to be able to be patient, to be curious. So I set up a framework of using 7 midot, 7 traits that we applied and used as our framework for our conversations. And we've met several times for hours and hours and hours talking about the war, but using the Mussar framework and the guidelines that I set and that they agreed with. And every time we meet, I always say, I just want to remind us that we are each children of God, that we are each a child of God. That the trait for that is B'Tselem Elohim, that we are each made in the image of God. So I always say that before we start. And one of them carries the guidelines, the Mussar framework guidelines that I created, in his pocket, in his jacket pocket, all the time. And whenever we meet, he just pulls it out. He says, this is how we're going to behave. And we've had very powerful, very painful conversations, but none of us have ever raised our voice. None of us have ever stomped away. None of us have even, and we've worked really hard at this, none of us have even interrupted each other. And we've all learned from each other. We have not necessarily changed our views. Like, I still know what I think about Israel, and I still stand with Israel. But we're not going to get into what that means. However, I have a better understanding of where they're coming from, what their passion is, and they see nuance where they didn't before. But the outcome of the and I'm going to say this, but I don't mean this in the way that you might think. I saw changing their minds about their view of the war. I saw that as a secondary goal. My goal was for us to try and create the interaction as a holy interaction, as a way where we could see each other's souls, not just each other's opinions. And Mussar is so clearly the path to do that, the method to do that. Let me just check the chat. How can you think of hatred or laziness as not a bad trait? It's a great question. I'll give an example. There are times, let's take laziness for a minute, and then I'll look at hatred for a second. There are unquestionably times when we push ourselves really hard, when we have a sense that our goal is to achieve. Our goal is to accomplish as much as we can in a day. Or our goal is to finish that report that we promised we would finish. So we're up till 2 a.m. finishing it. Our goal is we set the goal to whatever it may be, to clear the gutters. I'm in Boston, so I understand that you got to clear the leaves before the winter comes, right? And the goal is to clear the gutters no matter what. Even if I've done my back out, I am going to get up on the ladder and clear the gutters, right? Because that's what I have to do today. And that's what I said I would do. And I better do it. But before the first snow comes, right? And that's where we need laziness. That's where we need the ability. And I wouldn't call it lazy because that has pejorative. I would call it the trait of zerizut. The trait of zerizut means determination, persistence, and enthusiasm. So sometimes we are too determined to get something done that we have set for ourselves that we have to get done, even if it means that it's not good for our physical health, or we get too stressed and therefore we snap at our children or our families or whatever, and we're not even aware of it, or we ignore them because we're so focused on our goal. That's when we have too much zerizut, too much determination, and we need to release. And we need to move to the other, a little bit more in balance of saying, actually, there are times when it is okay to put down the goal and to pick up a different goal, which is to be compassionate to ourselves or compassionate to our children or whatever it may be. That's not laziness. Setting down a task that is keeping us from being the most holy we could be and whole, it's not bad. It's a decision. It takes discipline. It takes awareness, self-awareness. It takes hitlamdut, which is a Mussar stance, which means self-awareness. It takes a shift. It takes being aware that we've gotten stuck in a goal. I know someone who was determined to finish his PhD. That was his goal. He'd been working on it for 7 years, 9 years, 10 years. He was determined. And to let it go felt like a huge failure and felt like he was lazy and all those things. But over time, through study of Mussar, he realized actually it was no longer the right goal for him. And it was time to let it go. And he was able to be more whole and more holy in his life by letting go of that goal. That wasn't lazy. It was the wrong goal. Hatred. Hatred, sometimes it feels horrible, but there are certain things that we hate that are the right things to hate, to bring anger to bring disgust to bring a visceral reaction of this is wrong to. There are, and I'm sure you don't need me to think of things in our country at the moment, potentially, that might bring those feelings to you. The question is, what do we do with those feelings? How do we use what brings us disgust or hatred? How do we use that to help bring about change for the good, both within ourselves and others? So there are times when hatred of something, an idea or behavior needs to be there, because then otherwise we can become too complacent. So those are just a couple of examples. Let me just see if there's another. Oh, Judith. Oh, thank you. It's been very, very powerful. And it's a powerful framework that I'm happy to come back and share with you all more about how I've done that and how Mussar is such a powerful method for managing polarizing conversations. Talking about things that you may not be able to talk about that may not necessarily only have to do with Israel or the political situation in our country. It may be difficult conversations with your parents or whatever it may be. Mussar gives us this framework can be really useful. I want to say one thing tying in before we finish about the Omer that I brought in at the very beginning, which was the Omer, as you probably are aware, that I'm sure your rabbis and educators have talked about, is this period between the counting of the days between Passover and Shavuot. And in a way, we count the days so that we make each day count. And today, this is the trait for every week of the Omer of the 7 weeks has a particular trait. And the trait for this week is gevurah, strength. Some may call that discipline. Some may call it strength of character. Every day of the week also has a corresponding trait. And today, the combination of traits is Malchut Sheba Gevura. Malchut, which means majesty, and Gevura, which means strength or discipline. And it's one of my favorite Mussar days because Malchut is the trait that says we are majestic creatures, that human beings are amazing, that yes, we have hatred, yes, we have envy, yes, we have love, yes, we have compassion, yes, we're complex, contradictory, full of mess people, and we are God's children, and we are majestic and have amazing potential. And it can take discipline, it can take strength, it can take determination to live up to that potential, to achieve the potential of being majestic. And that is the goal of Mussar, to help us be the most majestic people we can be, and to have and use this methodology and the determination to change, to have the discipline to follow the kind of Mussar path to help us become the person we most want to be, and to have the ability to set boundaries on behavior that we know isn't the best behavior, to either shift that behavior or that attitude, to refrain, or to offer, to shift who we most need and want to be. So I invite you to, I'm going to put the website, my website. I teach a lot of Mussar. I know you have it sounds like a great Mussar teacher at your synagogue, and I'm happy to, and that's great. And I'm going to put my website down if you're interested. If you're interested in learning more, I'm offering 2 summer classes, very short summer classes, all of them on Zoom. One is about Mussar for outer activism. And the second is Mussar for inner peace and rest, how to kind of have both at the same time. And as Ike said, this year for the Omer, I'm using art, secular art, like right now, Georgia O'Keeffe and Henry Moore are my Mussar teachers at the moment, and using how their art can teach us more about Mussar. And in a couple of weeks, I'm switching to an artist called John Wilson, who's a Boston-based African-American artist who's amazing, all about how do we see ourselves as children of God or not, as the case may be. The following week, it's going to be Rembrandt, who's going to be our Mussar teacher. And I'm happy to, if you want to put your email in the chat, I'm happy to send those to you. And
I put your website in the chat already, and I
good.
also I found on Safaria the first book you mentioned.
Duties of the Heart.
Yes, found
Yes.
it.
And yes, you asked for the list of
Yeah,
the,
Abby did. Yeah, and I'd love that.
so
of
I'm
the
going to
video.
put that in the chat as well.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. And I
Amazing.
don't think you can sign up for the Omer emails on the website, actually. So if
Okay.
you want the, or you can go on Instagram. You can follow me on Instagram, which is A Soul in Balance, Mussar for Instagram.
Great.
Or you can email me, which is soul in balance at gmail.com. If you email me, you can send me your email address, or you can put the email address in the chat, and I'm happy to add you to the Omer list if you're interested in how art can teach us Mussar.
So I know Rabbi Sarad is going to want to thank you, but I want to say thank you. Our 100 blessings today is that your computer lasted until the hour is up. The whole time at the end, I was getting nervous for you, but that's what we have to be grateful for. That's what we have, the glass is half full. Did you have other?
Actually, Vanessa, I want to say I'm going to give us a Kabbalah, a spiritual practice. And that is, if you have time right when we end, just take a piece of paper and write down, I'm not going to give you 100, I'm going to say 20. Write down 20 things that you're grateful for, that you've noticed that you're grateful for this morning. 20 things. My favorite thing to do would be 20 things in the last hour, but I'll give you a break on that. So 20 things this morning that you have, that would be things that you would write on your list of things that you're grateful for. So that's your Kabbalah, your spiritual practice for this morning. And I'm also grateful that there isn't any smoke in my house. So I'm really grateful for that too. So,
okay. Marcia, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your time with us this morning. I think everybody on the call can feel from this hour what a joy it is just to be a friend of yours and just to be able to spend time and chat and talk with you. So, so your heart and your soul really come across in your teaching, and it was such a pleasure to have you with us today, and look forward to doing it again.
Really good to see all of you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Watch your Macomb at home. We got a lot of things coming up. You're not gonna, next week is Ryan Laverne, our MLB, our baseball player. And there's so much going on. I hope to see everybody there. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, Judith.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Ike.
Bye-bye.
Take care.